I made a promise to do a somewhat quirky series of videos for my beloved passport bros. While I don't see eye to eye with some of the endeavors of passport bros, I do respect the proactivity in venturing out of one's comfort zone and basically seeking new treasures in new lands. So within this series, I just want to create a set of supportive videos with regards to my experiences with dealing with different women, foreign women of different cultures. Now, as a disclaimer, this is obviously just my own ignorant perception, and of course, as a disclaimer, I do not aim to give out information on every single woman of a particular group or culture or nationality, just to get that out of the way. So first up, how do Ethiopian and Eritrean women treat black men? Now, I'm sure as many of you know, that group of women have often been my prime targets when it comes to pursuing a mate. So I've had a great deal of experience with dealing with women from Ethiopia and Eritrea. I've had a good deal of experience in understanding certain cultural formalities, behavior patterns, traits, etc. So I'm just going to divulge into different groups about what I've learned in dealing with Ethiopian and Eritrean women. First up, the culture. So the main reason why I've taken a particular liking to these women of East Africa is because, for the most part, they are very intertwined with their traditional culture, at least on the surface, and definitely, especially the Ethiopian women who are either based in Africa or fresh from Africa coming to Europe, for example. What I've always taken a liking to was their traditional garb, which is this white, Old Testament looking one piece, which is used in certain events related to the church. Now, of course, Ethiopia, there are many Christians, one of the early African countries to become Christian. There are also Jews, a lot of Jews, and there are also, of course, Muslims. So a very religious nation, as are many nations in Africa. So I believe this culture is very well suited towards westernized black men. Now, when it comes to appearance and looks, it goes without saying that these women are one of the typically prettiest women on the globe, in my humble opinion. Sporting delicate, feminine facial features and natural hair that they are not ashamed to reveal to the world. But you should know that a significant amount of Ethiopian and Eritrean women do actually wear weaves, even though they don't really need it. Physically now, bodies can be a bit mixed. Not every Ethiopian woman has a booty, for example. You could meet a lot of Ethiopians who are very thin, almost have awkward builds, but you still meet a lot of women like that, but still have pretty face. So for some men, it's been a fair balance. But I think, of course, the appearance and keeping with the traditional culture is one of the great attractive points when it comes to speaking about Ethiopian women, Eritrean women, because this typically reveals a type of woman who is not ashamed of their natural features and gifts, and so you have a very quiet, proud woman. Now, going on to attitude, unfortunately, to be honest with you, because a lot of Ethiopian Eritrean women are gassed up because they are aware that they are quite sought after. They are seen as a pretty and attractive. In fact, you might find a lot of Ethiopian men who might be cock blocking, and you might see multiple men with one woman, for example. But this has affected some Ethiopian women's attitude. So you might find what we here in London call stush Ethiopian and Eritrean women. Stush basically means arrogant, proud, haughty, evasive. The typical attitude of someone who pretty much won't settle for anything less than what they believe they deserve. And for me, that's fine. What you might find is someone who, especially here in London, and from my experiences in Scandinavia, you find these are typically women that end up being single in their 30s and 40s, most probably because of this attitude, where they took people for granted or just had very super high expectations. And I think this is the reason why there's a stigma that these East African women do not typically go for quote-unquote black men, because I guess to some degree black men do not equate to high economical standards, for example. So especially in some Eritrean women's cases, having been formerly colonized by Italy, you got a lot of them who triumph learning Italian, using Italian words, and many going to Italy. There are many Eastern Africans, Eritreans in Rome, for example, who seek an Italian lifestyle. So that attitude might not be very conducive to the average brother. The quote-unquote feminism effect, and this is me saying how open these women are to being within the doctrine of feminism, it's quite high. So I've met many, I say many, but quite a few Eritrean women, for some reason Eritrean more than Ethiopian women, who are quiet, hardcore feminists. They are doing poetry on feminism and equality and, the powers of femininity, etc., etc. And so with that, you will naturally find a quiet, rebellious person. And again, this is, an attitude that is probably not conducive with most black men, especially black men who are striving for a more traditional setting. When it comes to the understanding of quote-unquote black culture, now obviously Ethiopian and Eritrean people are black people, black African peoples. And so when I refer to black culture, I'm speaking about the typical Western black culture. So that could do with the music, it could be, with how receptive they are to quote-unquote black cultural activities, you would say, or genre of music, for example. When it comes to understanding black culture, of course, being being black people, they understand pretty well. Of course, many Ethiopian Eritrean women gravitate naturally to hip-hop, R&B music. From my experience, quite romantic, which might not be a great thing, because you've got, again, with the attitude and the feminism effect, you've got this person who is very willing to absorb the lyrics of certain artists, certain celebrities, certain trains of thought. But, generally speaking, there's a great understanding of the quote-unquote black culture because they are black people. When it comes to their parents' generation, for the most part, a lot more traditional. What you find especially is that a lot of Ethiopian, Eritrean, and also Somalian people emigrated some decades ago to a lot of European and other countries, usually because of famine or because of civil war. So, for example, you find quite a few Eastern Africans in Scandinavia, like I said. You find a few in Holland and here in England. Here in London, they have the Ethiopian church, for example. But often the parents are much more traditional. They typically openly wear their traditional garb, their clothing, and sometimes their henna. Some people even have real tattoos of the symbol of Christ on their forehead, for example. Usually the older generations, the grandparents. So, this might be important for you if you want to understand, I guess, their grounding, their cultural and traditional grounding. Parents very religious, and saying that, because of that, and because of the sort of national pride, a lot of the parents don't really want to see their daughters go to non-Ethiopian or non-Eritrean men. And I think also because of, tribal mindsets, that also very much includes other African men. So in some cases, I found some parents who seem like they prefer their daughters to be with white Christian men, for example. So there is that tribal element with the parents' generation. When it comes to education, I wouldn't say education seems to be of great importance to Ethiopian and Eritrean women, generally speaking, from what I've seen. I theorize that, when you're very attractive, you might typically not prioritize learning, probably feel like you don't need to as a woman. Some rich guy will save you. And so I kind of think that typically, generally speaking, across the board, a lot of the attractive women probably don't have strong education. So for me, I find a lot of Eritreans, Ethiopians, not to say that it's bad, but, often in professions like being hairdressers, working in retail, for example, working in customer-facing roles, beauty shops, high-end retail. Again, this is just my own personal observation, my own personal experiences, but it doesn't seem that further education is high on the agenda when it comes to Ethiopian and Eritrean women. And this might be critical for you if you are seeking, a woman who has the ability to create something or work with you or work for you and supply a service or something like that, So what can black men learn from the pairing of being with Ethiopian and Eritrean women? Well, what I've learned is that while on the surface they appear like perhaps the perfect choice for a Western black man, especially for the honest fact that our beauty standards has been Europeanized, if we keep it real. So, we see a typical Ethiopian woman, and that is a massive part of the attraction to her, is that we see something like a mixed person, a mixture, almost like a mix between black and Arab, for example. So although on the surface it's quite appealing, you will realize that in many facets, now this could be from the absorption of general mainstream media, but you will notice that Ethiopian and Eritrean women are pretty much the same as your typical black women in the West. So once you engage in that pairing, you realize that it's pretty much the same thing, bar a few cultural aspects such as the traditional aspect, and smaller things like not needing to wear weaves. But again, a lot of Ethiopian and Eritrean women do want to wear weaves even though they don't need to. So it's obviously a fashion statement, quiet vein or quiet high maintenance, wanted to look good, and obviously that will mean other material things, nails, eyelashes, bags, shoes, the whole nine. So you're gonna realize that on that front you're pretty much dating a standard Western black woman. So keep that in mind, especially if you might have some sort of one-itis or cultural one-itis like I've had in the past, and you think one group is different from the other. Keep that in mind when you approach the Ethiopian or Eritrean woman. In the next video, we'll be speaking about Moroccan women, so stay tuned. For now, it's your boy Falcon out. Peace.